In 1989, my then editor and publisher and friend John Herman of Ticknor and Fields, now defunct, asked me what I might be thinking of writing next. I thought for a while and said, a book about 1940, more precisely about the 80 days from the 10th of May to the 31st of July 1940, marked by the duel between Winston Churchill and Adolf Hitler. While writing the duel, I again spent a few weeks in England at the Public Record Office and at some other archives. In the duel, about 14 or 15 pages were devoted to the last week of May 1940. And then, 7 years after the completion of the manuscript of the duel, I chose to return to the history of those days, encouraged by the editorial director of Yale University Press, my present publishers. In 1997 and 1998, I returned to London twice for the purposes of my researches, broadened and deepened by reading in a large variety of archives and private papers. Habent sua fata libelli. This is the story of the present book. Thus it may be said that this book amounts to the completion of a very lopsided trilogy, from 3 pages in the last European war to 15 pages in the duel, and then to about 200 pages in this one, or from macrocosmic to microcosmic history of a sort. A friend said the other day in mock seriousness, "Will your next book be 3 hours in London?" No, it won't. I must now add a caveat. This is that not only the scope, but the structures of the above-mentioned books are very different. A somewhat uncategorizable historian, I am not a specialist in British political or social or military history. However, one consideration may intrude here. During the past 15 or 20 years, British historians have written valuable articles and books dealing with Churchill and Halifax and the politics of war, parts of which include those 5 days in May 1940. At the risk of presumption, I shall venture to say that I have had one advantage over many of them. This has been my knowledge about Hitler, or rather my familiarity with documents and other materials relating to him, in this case especially in 1940. For without understanding what Hitler said and thought and how close he came to winning the war in May 1940, that secondary duel between Churchill and Halifax in the War Cabinet seems less important. A flicker of doubt, perhaps, a conflict between two personalities, a footnote in the political history of modern Britain. There were and are reasons to look at and treat the 5 days in London in May in that way. Such treatments are not necessarily the results of narrow-mindedness or excessive specialization. Tightly focused views are often useful where there is a kind of broad-mindedness that can be flat. In this book, however, I have attempted to combine the narrowing acuity of a specialist with a broader perspective, aware that perspective is a component of reality itself. In sum, that during those 5 days in London, the danger, not only to Britain but to the world, was greater and deeper than most people still think. Acknowledgements. I can recall few books of mine where my debts are as many as they are for this one. Let me list them according to their relative order, though not according to their relative importance. I wish to affirm my appreciation for Yale University Press, with which my relations have been untroubled by the problems and irritations that nowadays beset most authors, and especially for the press's editorial director, Jonathan Brent, and superb manuscript editor, Brenda W. Kolb, and to the Earhart Foundation and its secretary, Anthony Sullivan, who, as often in the past, were ready and willing and generous in offering financial assistance for my researches in England. My principal research assistant in the Public Record Office was Andras D. Ban, whose reliability, precision, and thorough knowledge of the intricacies of the PRO files were invaluable. Joanna Shaw Myers volunteered to accompany me to Cambridge, assisting my passage through the large and exceptionally well catalogued Churchill archives. Among British scholars of modern English history, Philip Bell and Brian Bond gave fine advice and often essential guidance, as did David Astor, David Dilks, M.R.D. Foote, and Andrew Roberts. Among American scholars of British literary history, Samuel Hines offered the same. The librarian at the Foreign Office in London, as well as the archivists and keepers of Churchill College and Trinity College at Cambridge University, of the Neville Chamberlain papers in the Library of the University of Birmingham, of the Halifax diaries and papers in the Borthwick Institute of Historical Research at the University of York, of the Mass Observation Archives in the University of Sussex of Falmer, Brighton, of the Nicholson diaries in the Library of Balliol College at Oxford University, of the Astor papers in the Library of the University of Reading,